Obi Wan Kenobi was a servant leader. And in this part of the universe, away from all those galactic forever wars, everybody seems to be a servant leader, whether they work in business, nonprofit, government agencies, schools, Hollywood studios.
You have no brain.
Okay, maybe not Hollywood studios. But if you use job interviews as a barometer, everybody's a servant leader. But are they? Are they really all servant leaders? Are you really a servant leader? Can you live up to the standards set by the once great Jedi Knight turned desert planet recluse Obi Wan Kenobi? Well, you'll find out in this video essay. We'll be exploring a thumbnail history of servant leadership, how the novelist Hermann Hesse inspired the idea for servant leadership, the characteristics of a servant leader, controversies surrounding servant leadership. Because let's face it, we can turn anything into a controversy these days. And finally, the latest research on servant leadership. It deals with contagions. All using the legendary Jedi Knight Obi Wan Kenobi as our object lesson for what servant leadership can look like, whether you're leading a galactic rebellion or you're just trying to coach your local bowling team.
Am I the only one around here who gives about the rules?
You know, Hollywood should really think about doing a Big Lebowski Star Wars crossover. The Nihilists Strike Back. Don't be a nihilist. Like and subscribe. Part 1. A thumbnail history of servant leadership. Robert K Greenleaf, born 1904, first proposed his theory of servant leadership in his seminal 1970 essay, The Servant as Leader. Talk about late blooming, the guy was 66. Before writing that essay and launching his leadership consulting business, Greenleaf had been the director of management research at AT&T. So undoubtedly, many of his ideas began to form around servant leadership while he was training managers for the burgeoning telecommunications giant. His work was also deeply rooted in his Quaker faith. The Quakers, otherwise known as the Friends, is a religious denomination founded by George Fox in England during the 1640s. While on a spiritual quest, and there will be a lot in this video essay about spiritual quests and spiritual groups. Fox met others who desired a reformation of the Church of England so people could have a more direct experience with God rather than going through the bureaucracy of church leadership. Okay, we need you to complete forms A, B, and Z. Pay the cashier $10 and we'll get your prayer in the queue to be answered by God. So a fundamental tenet of Quakerism is that God resides in all of us, just like the Force.
The Force is what gives the Jedi his power. It's an energy field created by all living things. It surrounds us and penetrates us. It binds the galaxy together.
And they embraced a more flattened out organizational structure, promoted greater equality between men and women, and emphasized concepts like peace and care as core values. Greenleaf said that servant leaders feel a natural impulse to serve people, rather than pursue power, wealth, fame, influence, bling.
You know, in America it's bling bling, but out here it's bling bang, huh?
Greenleaf continued, conscious choice brings one to aspire to lead. The difference manifests itself in the care taken by the servant. First, to make sure that other people's highest priority needs are being served. The best test is, do those served grow as persons? Do they, while being served, become healthier, wiser, freer, more autonomous, more likely themselves to become servants? So it's important to note that servant leadership is connected to spiritual leadership and spirituality, and not just Quaker spirituality, as we'll see later in this video. So in that vein, it's very much like the Force. The orientation for becoming a servant leader comes from a feeling deep inside yourself. While some people seek power through authoritarianism, like the Emperor and Darth Vader, others, like Obi Wan Kenobi, seek to serve people, whether they receive material gains or not. And we've got to admit, Obi-Wan exemplifies this. The man camped out in a cave on a desert planet for 18 years to watch some bratty kids shoot womp rats for target practice. And that cave did not look too comfortable. They should really think about opening an IKEA on Tatooine.
Are you ready?
Business ideas, folks, business ideas. These videos are full of them. So just make sure to subscribe and hit that like button so you can get more business gems like that one. Part 2, Hermann Hesse, Servant Leadership, and Obi Wan Kenobi. Greenleaf also drew inspiration from the novel Journey to the East by Hermann Hesse. You might remember the German-Swiss novelist for his more famous works like Siddhartha, Steppenwolf, and The Glass Bead Game, for which he won the Nobel Prize in Literature in 1964. Or maybe not. Hesse's work is deeply existential and mystical, exploring themes of authenticity and self-knowledge, which clearly spoke to Greenleaf's Quaker roots. In Journey to the East, the narrator, H.H., get it, H.H., relays a story about a quest for spiritual rejuvenation. He belongs to a secret society called the League or Order, depending on the translation. The Order is this ancient organization that included many great people throughout history in its membership ranks, including Plato, Mozart, Pythagoras, Paul Klee, and Puss in Boots. Puss in Boots? Puss in Boots. The novel takes place post-World War I and on the brink of World War II. Feeling drained due to the state of the world. Imagine that. A group of people from the Order head east on a journey to find a spiritual leader who will reveal to them the ultimate truth.
The truth is out there.
They are assisted by a servant named Leo who helps them with menial chores like carrying bags and cooking dinner, but he also helps them with spiritual rejuvenation through the songs that he performs. And Leo helps them traverse space and time and all kinds of wondrous landscapes to arrive in Morbio Inferiore, a small town in Switzerland that dates back to 1148 AD. Then Leo just up and disappears. And then the whole group falls apart and they start accusing Leo of stealing their stuff, and then their stuff turns back up. Hey honey, have you seen my glasses? I looked everywhere for them. I know I left them right here. Humans, you know the story. I'm not going to tell you the rest. You can read the book. It's short. But in the end, they discover that Leo was actually the president of the Order, and his vanishing act was a test, which they all failed. And so Leo became Greenleaf's archetype for the servant leader. And it's important to remember that Obi-Wan is leading Han, Luke, and Leia on a spiritual journey. And like Leo, he's not very respected at first either.
Kid, I've flown from one side of this galaxy to the other. I've seen a lot of strange stuff, but I've never seen anything to make me believe there's one all-powerful force controlling everything.
A quote from Hesse's Journey to the East captures an interesting aspect to this discussion. He who wishes to live must serve, but he who wishes to rule will not live long. Now, Hesse is not talking about physical life with this quote, but rather spiritual life. Immortality, if you will. And from a contemporary leadership perspective, I'd go so far as to say it speaks to the cultural life of an organization, because that's a way of achieving immortality as well, by remaining part of an organization's story. We only live on in the minds of others after we leave an organization, whether it's through getting a better job, deciding to spend more time with our families, wink, 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 or meeting an untimely demise at the hands of an HR Sith Lord. Wait, aren't those two things the same? I'm confused. Look, I imagine you have fonder memories of those leaders who approached their work from a servant leadership perspective rather than an authoritarian one. Those are probably the people you reflect on when you're wrestling with difficult decisions. And that's its own form of cultural immortality, the continued influence. And that's something Obi-Wan knew all too well when he sacrificed himself to Darth Vader.
Darth, if you strike me down, I shall become more powerful than you can possibly imagine.
And that's not to say that bad authoritarian leaders don't continue to haunt organizations. It's just that they won't elicit the same warm feelings or exert the same level of influence over people's behaviors. Part 3, the characteristics of a servant leader. Greenleaf identified several traits that he associated with servant leadership, and I think you'll agree that Obi-Wan demonstrates several of these. Listening and understanding. Turn off the news and other noise and learn how to listen to people around you first. Language and imagination. Use as few words as possible to excite people's imaginations and connect to their experience, maybe even just gesture. Withdraw. Withdraw to reorient yourself and reflect on how you can best use your limited resources to serve. Acceptance and empathy. Always accept and empathize with the person or information presented to you. Never reject it. Know the unknowable. Use your intuition to see the unknowable and foresee the unforeseeable, so you can make decisions based on the patterns you see in the limited data available. Foresight. Live in two worlds, the immediate day-to-day and the one above it all, so that you're able to see the scope of history, what came before, and what might be coming in an indefinite future. Awareness and perception. Opening the doors of perception wider so you can take in more sensory experience and signals than people normally do. Persuade people one at a time. Convince people of your ideas one at a time through consistent and clear persuasion. One action at a time. Pursue your goals one incremental action at a time. It all adds up. Conceptualize. Draw on your love, vision, and long-term commitment to achieving your goal. And then there is healing. Greenleaf defined healing as making people whole by achieving balance and integration with the world. He believed servant leaders could do this by building institutions that nurtured community and focused on people building rather than people using. So we can see a lot of these attributes in Obi Wan Kenobi. Awareness and perception, knowing the unknown, foresight, and there are some aspects of servant leadership where Obi Wan Kenobi falls short. He doesn't use the conceptualization trait where he comes up with big ideas and dreams that the team can execute strategically. And I wouldn't necessarily call him a community builder. He certainly wasn't organizing raves with the Jawa and sand people on Tatooine. But Greenleaf acknowledged that not everybody would possess all these traits, and some might possess traits that other servant leaders don't have, like the ability to show up at Thanksgiving dinner as a Force ghost to continue an argument with a disgruntled relative.
You don't act right, you're not part of the family.
Oh, yeah.
Part 4. Servant Leader Controversies. As nice as servant leadership is as a theory, it's important to remember it's not without its critiques. Critique 1. Greenleaf did not invent servant leadership. Jesus did.
You said it, man.
No, not that Jesus. Jesus Christ. The Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve, and to give his life a ransom for many. And they do have a point. We've already established that many of Greenleaf's ideas are rooted in his Quaker faith. From a servant leadership archetype perspective, there are some significant similarities between Christ's crucifixion and Obi-Wan's sacrifice. Critique 2. Native Americans and other people of color also claim ownership of servant leadership ideas. From a 2002 article, Keeping the Circle Strong, Learning About Native American Leadership by Martha McLeod, Larry Spears argues there's a revolution underway. That revolution is servant leadership, which is congruent with Native American leadership philosophy. In the minds of the servant leader, the needs of his or her employees, customers, constituents, and community become the most important reason for a company's existence. Leaders nurture both the institution and those affected by the institution. Critique 3. It all sounds way too touchy and feely to me. How are you going to measure any of these variables anyhow? It all sounds like a bunch of woo-woo to me. Critique 4. And what am I supposed to tell my boss the next time my team isn't able to achieve its goals? Oh, sorry, boss. My team just needs a little bit more time for personal healing. Oh, he's going to love that. He's going to love that. Critique 5. And the term servant leadership, I mean, it kind of diminishes the role of the leader. And it's kind of misleading, too. I mean, can't we come up with a better name like facilitator or agile leader, scrum master, transformational leader, something? Or maybe we should just call it Jedi leadership, and we can introduce the concept to society in that new Big Lebowski Star Wars movie crossover, The Return of the Jesus. Part 5. Recent research on servant leadership. Some recent research published in 2022 by Kahn and Murabik et al. Found that servant leadership could be contagious within an organization. When a leader exhibits servant leadership behaviors, others in the organization will also begin adopting those behaviors in what the researchers call servant colleagueship. And we saw that servant leadership contagion in Star Wars. Han was ready to leave at the end of the movie with his reward money, but then he swoops in at the last minute to help Luke save the day and destroy the Death Star. Now, there may be many reasons why Han decided to do that, but one of them certainly could be that he saw people like Obi-Wan displaying servant leadership, and he caught the bug. Conclusion. In a video recorded in 1986, shortly before he died in 1990, Greenleaf lamented the malaise that he saw infecting so many organizations. Definition of malaise from Merriam-Webster: a vague sense of mental or moral ill-being. Greenleaf's diagnosis, which included religious organizations like seminaries, he felt they were experiencing this malaise because they were poor in spirit. Greenleaf's radical idea was to bring seminaries from all religions into businesses to propagate more servant leaders in order to address this malaise by creating a theology of institutions. I think this gets back to the idea of mutual healing by going into companies to raise their spirits. The seminary spirit would get raised as well. This raises several concluding questions. Do you think organizations in the West are still experiencing this malaise that Greenleaf described 40 years ago? And if servant leadership is so popular, if we are to believe people during their job interviews, is it having any impact on this malaise? Greenleaf acknowledged that it was going to be a tall order to transform organizations using servant leadership. Like the Empire, there's a bureaucracy in place built on a mechanistic, engineered view of organizations that isn't necessarily compatible with servant leadership all the time. And servant leadership is just one of a plethora of leadership theories out there, and it might not be for everybody, and not everybody can be Obi Wan Kenobi, and not every situation calls for Obi Wan Kenobi. It's all nuanced. And maybe there's another leadership theory out there that's going to be more suitable for your situation. These video essays are designed to introduce you to concepts and spark discussions. They're not meant to be exhaustive. We definitely encourage you to research the topic of servant leadership more. There's a lot out there on it. Go do some additional research. And if you like this video, please subscribe, hit the like button, share it with friends, leave some comments. Let us know what you think about this topic. And that way you can keep up when we post new video essays or more episodes of the Sense and Signal podcast, where me and my co-host Joda Jensen discuss leadership and sense-making in a complex world. And you might even catch our self-produced Big Lebowski Star Wars crossover, The Last Lebowski.